Hello there, my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a wire knitting spool necklace where we add in larger beads. And the beads can really add some lovely colour and sparkle to the piece, so if you want to learn how to make it, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. First of all, the wire that I'm using here is a regular round silver coated copper wire, and it's a 0.4mm. And then the beads that I'm using are these 8mm rounds. Now I'm using two different colours just to kind of mix it up, but you can obviously use one or more colours, it's completely up to you. And then the tool that we need to make the braid with, I'm using this knitting spool with 4 prongs, and alongside that I'm going to be using this crochet hook. Now this specific one is a 1.25mm. It doesn't have to be that specific size, that's just what I like to use alongside the spool. And then finally I just have my findings here, so I've got some kumihimo ends that I'm going to use to finish off the ends of the braid with, and then of course my findings, so lots of claw clasp and extended chain and my jump rings that we're going to attach to the kumihimo ends. Now I'm going to have this whole material list and links in the description box down below so you can check that out if you need to. Otherwise, let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. So I'm not going to cut any lengths of wire to make this piece. I'm literally going to be working with it still attached to the reel, because we don't really know how much we need to use, so rather just work straight from the reel here. Now I'm going to release a length, and then also before we start making any part of the braid, we need to add our beads first of all. So I'm just going to get them ready. Now because I'm using two colours, I want to alternate, so I'm just going to start with one and just adding the beads onto the length of wire that's attached to the reel in the order that I want them to sit. And obviously if you're just using one colour, just add your beads. So just add all the beads that you're going to use to the length of wire attached to the reel. So I now added all my beads here, and then I'm just going to push them down to sit basically by the spool. And I have a length here that I'm going to start working with, because I'm just going to wait a little bit and not add the beads in straight away. So then we want to take our knitting spool here. Now I've just attached a piece of scrap wire around one of the prongs. You don't really need to do that for this, but I kind of like to have that there on one just to kind of know a starting point, and so we know each round and when it's finished and we start the next one. But that's up to you. Then what I'm going to do is take the length of wire here that's attached to the reel with all the beads on, but like I said, the beads are pushed out of the way for now, and we need to put this down through from the top, and then it comes out here at the bottom. And I'm just going to kind of hold on to that for now, down there, while we then get this started. So we first of all need to kind of attach this wire. So I'm going to go around, I'm just going to start with that prong that I marked with the wire. I'm going to bring it around the right over the front here, and then back around the left, and then come behind. So I basically looped it around once, and then I move on to the next one. So come behind them, loop around that, and then you rotate the spool here while holding it in your hand, loop around the next one, and then we have one left. You also loop around that. And then we have something that looks a little bit like this. I now need to come behind these two prongs, and the next prong that I'm going to reach is the very first one that we started with, and also in this case here the one with the marker on. And now this is kind of the initial round. Now we need to start the actual pattern of making the braid. So to do that, and again for now I'm not adding any beads in yet, we come behind, and you want to then do another loop in the exact same way around this prong, but you want to make sure that the wire that we're working with and this loop that we're making just now sits above the previous one. Obviously you can just ignore that kind of marker that I have, but those two loops that are now sitting on there, you want to make sure the new one sits above the first one. And then I like to bring the wire around towards the next prong and kind of hold onto it between my fingers here, because then I take my crochet hook, and then we need to start. We have two loops on this prong, I need to take my crochet hook in and come underneath and grab onto the bottom one of the two. And you pull it out a little bit and bring it up over the top loop and over the prong. And you just bring it into the middle, and it's going to sit basically loose there in the middle. And then we take the wire, get to the next prong, go around that in the same direction. Again, make sure it's above the previous one that's already on there. So we're now always going to have one loop on each prong, and the one we're working with, we're going to then have 2 loops until we then move on to the next one. So again, take the crochet hook, go in from below the bottom loop, grab onto it, bring it over the top loop and over the prong itself and into the middle. And you can see it sits kind of loose in there in the middle. So to begin with, it's going to maybe look a little bit messy until we kind of get into the pattern properly, but it will all sort itself out. Move on to the next one, grab onto the bottom loop, bring it up and over, and just release it into the middle. And you just continue like this. Bring it up and over the new loop and the prong itself. And now you can see I've finished another round because I've now reached back to the beginning where I had my marker. So that just means I did a complete round. So you just keep going like this. Now I'm going to do a section just with the wire here before I start adding beads in. It's up to you how long you want that to be, because obviously it depends as well how many beads you're using and just overall how you want it to look. But you're going to start to then see the braid forming in the middle here, and it's going to come down through the center of the piece and gradually then work its way through and come out here where the tail of the wire is. Now you can then gently, as you're going, pull on this a little bit. Don't pull too tight, but just help pull at it to help it go down through the spool there. So just keep going like this. So now I made the amount of rounds that I want before I start adding beads in, and you can see here I have the length coming down through the spool, and again I'm using that tail to help pull it through gently. Now I'm just gonna do the next prong, because then I'm gonna start adding beads in. So just get underneath the bottom loop, bring it up and over the prong. And now this is where also it's handy using the marker, because for this design here I want to add the bead in the same place every time I do it. So that's what the marker can be handy for as well. So I want to add the bead in now before I go to the next prong. So I'm just going to grab the very first bead and I'm going to let it drop down. Now it's going to slide all the way in there, and it's going to basically sit in between the 2 prongs. So just let it sit there. If you need to, you can kind of hold on to it with your finger, and then take the wire and just go around the next prong, make a loop so you have 2 loops in there, and the bead is just going to stay sitting there. And otherwise we just continue with the exact same technique. So bring the bottom loop up and over, and then the bead sits there. Now I'm only going to be adding 1 bead per round, and it's not every round either. So just to show you the pattern here, I'm going to finish this round off by just going around each of the remaining prongs without adding beads in, and just gently pull it down every now and then when you feel like you need a bit more space to work with on the prongs. Up and over, around the next prong, and you can see I've already reached the point where I finish off this round. So grab that bottom loop, and then This is the point where I added the bead in before in the previous round. So I'm going to start the next round here, but I'm not going to add a bead in now, because let me just drop one down. If I drop it down, you're going to be able to see that it kind of won't really fit sitting on top of the other one. So what I'm going to do instead is just now do the next round without adding a bead. So the previous round I just did, I added that bead that's there now. Now this round here, I'm going to do without adding a bead. So I'm just going to do a full round with just the wire. Going from prong to prong. All the way around. Grabbing that bottom loop. Doing the final one here. Finishing off this round where I didn't add a bead in. And now I reached the point again where I added that bead in not the previous round, but the round before that. So there you can see as well, I just pulled down on the tail a little bit because that creates more space here, which we now need, because now I do want to add another bead in. So now I do grab the next bead in line. I literally let it drop down like I did before to sit in between those two same prongs, and it's going to sit basically on top of the other one, but we then have a wire in between them because of that round that we just did without adding a bead in. But we just continue, let the bead drop down there, and then kind of lock it in place by doing the next loop around the next prong, up, over and into the middle. And then you finish off this round without adding any more beads in. All the way around to the last one here. Grab hold of that, bring it over. And then again, I just pull down a little bit. You can see it kind of moves down inside of the spool. And then because the round that we just made, we added that bead in, that means the round I'm going to make now, I'm not going to add a bead. So just literally go straight on to the next one. Up and over. Onto the next one. Complete this round without the bead. So we get that wire in between the two beads. And the last one. Like that. And you can see previous round we had the wire sitting on top of the bead. So that means now, before I drop the next bead in, I just want to pull down a little bit here, which then opens up some more space. And then we'll grab the next bead, let it drop down to sit in between these two prongs, and then we'll just continue. So this is how you want to keep going now. Now that we started adding the beads in, I'm doing it basically every other round. And that's the pattern, so you can see it's the exact same technique. You just occasionally, every other round, you drop in a bead in the same place, so in between the same prongs throughout. And you just keep going like this until you added all your beads in. So now I used up all my beads here on the wire, and then you'll find that I have a nice length of my braid, and obviously the beads are then sitting inside of it and they're alternating like I added the beads. And then we have that length with the beads, and then that length at the beginning without the beads. So now that I've used all the beads, all I'm going to do now is repeat the beginning to basically make a similar length but without beads. So you just want to continue. I made the previous round was the one that goes in between the beads, so I didn't add a bead. And instead of now adding a bead to this round like we would do, because obviously we don't have any more beads to use, I'm literally just going to continue wrapping the wire around over the top, or above it rather, and then bringing the wire from below over and in. And you just do this for about the same length as before we added any beads in to begin with. So now that I've done that, I've got to the end here, and now I just want to start finishing it off. So what I'm first of all going to do is just go down my wire a little bit so I have a length left, and then I'm going to cut it off from the reel. So we can put that away. And then, now I'm going to basically do another round, but it's going to be slightly different because what I'm going to be doing is the next prong that I'm using is this one here, the very first one. So instead of now wrapping this wire around, I'm just going to leave it behind. And then I'm going to take that loop that's on the prong, which is the only one, and I'm going to bring it up and over. So now I basically have no loops on this prong, obviously aside from that marker wire, but it doesn't really count. And then putting my crochet hook through the loop from the front, and then I'm going to grab onto, let's get that through there, grab onto the wire with the hook as I'm pulling my hook back through the loop. And then I take that length of wire with me and pull it all the way through, and that's why we cut it off, because we then have an open end. So that's one, then move on to the next one. So that's one loop there released. Moving on to the next one. Release the loop first of all, bring it up and over, and then put the crochet hook through, grab it onto the wire, and pull it back through with you. So basically, we're bringing the end of the wire through all the loops to make sure they don't unravel. Go on to the next one, and I'm just going all the way around and repeating this. So, like I said, we secure it, but also in that process, we release the piece from the wire spool, or the knitting spool rather, not the wire spool. And the last one, release the loop first, and then bring the wire through. And there we go. And then I can just pull my piece all the way through, and I now have it released, and I have my full length. What I then like to do is here on the open end that we just released from the knitting spool, take the very end of the wire, and I just go back through the next loop in the same direction that the wire was going already. So I basically kind of start to bring it through again for another round. It's just to kind of get a complete circle. So when I then go to close this up, because obviously right now it's pretty open, whereas the other end is nicely closed, I obviously want to achieve the same. So that's why I like to pull it through, making sure to go through that extra loop, and then I pull the wire gently. That basically closes up the end here. And there we have this end sealed up as well. Now this is then where we're left with. The middle here obviously is where the beads are, and depending on the spool, the knitting spool that you use, in my case this braid with the beads only kind of just fit through, so it naturally kind of settled everything in place. Otherwise what you can do is run your fingers and hands over it, and also what you'll notice is the ends are actually different. So this one here has gotten thinner, so narrow, and also looks slightly different with the loops, and that's because as I was pulling it through, it started to kind of settle in place naturally, like the beaded section did as well. So as you can see, obviously the last section hasn't done that yet, so I'm just going to have to do that myself. So all you do is just start using your hands and fingers and gently kind of settle all the wire in place, and you just get it to the place that you like it really. Now obviously my aim is to basically get the two ends to look the same. So just keep running it through my fingers. And it also becomes nice and flexible, so you get a really nice movement in it. As you can see, we're slowly getting there. Comparing to the piece, the other end. So you just do this until you're happy with how both ends look. And obviously also, like I said, if you need to run through the beaded part as well. So all that's left to do now is finish off the ends here. I'm just going to show you on the one. Now we want to get rid, first of all, of this excess length of wire. So where it's coming out from, I'm just going to see what direction it's kind of going in. I can see it's coming kind of towards this side, my right, when I hold it like this. So what I want to do is grab the very end, and I'm just going to bring it back over the top and then go through a few of the loops. So like that, going straight through from one side to the other. And then I'm just pulling it down. And I'm basically just going to do this a few times in the same space. And this is just to kind of securely finish off the wire before we actually cut it off, so nothing's going to come undone in any way. So just do it a few times, a bit like this. And also it's a way of not adding too much bulk. So there we go. Then I'm just going to go in and kind of just bringing it around again, but I'm not putting it through. Then I cut off the excess. And then just grab my chain nose pliers and just bring it into the braid, you could say, as if I was wrapping it around again, just to kind of get rid of that end, tucking it away. And you don't have to worry too much about this being neat or anything, because what I'm going to be doing is basically adding this kumihimo end over the top, so it's all obviously going to be hidden inside of there. And to make sure the kumihimo end is going to stay on the end of the wire, I'm going to be using my E6000 glue, because it works really well, I find, with metal. So I'm just going to add a bit. I'm just using a toothpick here to apply it with. We want to first of all get a bit inside of the kumihimo end. Just make sure to kind of coat all the sides all the way around. You don't want to fill it up 100% so it's level with the top, because obviously the end of our braid is going to go in there, but you want to add a decent amount. And I do also like to just take a bit and add it to the end to basically make sure I get some of the glue in between the wire. It's obviously crossing over and under each other, or itself rather, but just to make sure the glue is going to go in there, so it's really going to adhere well together and become much more secure. So something like that, and then all I want to do is add the kumihimo end over the top of the end here. You just want to gently push it in as far as it'll go. And then obviously you need to leave this to dry until it's fully dried, and repeat on the other end, and then we have these loops on the kumihimo ends where we can attach our findings. So once you let your glue dry and you've added your clasp, your piece is ready to wear. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial for this wire knitting spool necklace. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.